This scene shows an old complex building surrounded with big trees. Everybody was asleep in their homes. A man can be seen walking in the street. While he's walking, he noticed there was a strange person walking on the opposite side of him. The man continued to walk. Then the strange person began to follow him wherever he's going. The man stopped for a couple of seconds. He then asked to the person,
"Can I help you with something?"
asked the man. But the person didn't respond to the man. The person was just standing in the shadows, staring at him. The man turned away and continued to walk. Moments later, the man looked back to see if the person was still there. But to the man's surprise, the strange person wasn't there.
"What the hell? Where did he gone off to?"
said the man. The man began to run as he turned forward. What came next was the horrifying. That man saw the person in front of him a couple of meters away from him. Turns out the person wasn't even human. It was a shadow figure. The shadow figure began to sprint towards the man with an incredible, inhuman speed. Screamed the man. The next scene shows two boys in the complex talking that seemed to be important, while a man happened to live in the same place was enjoying his morning coffee. He sees the two boys from his window talking, thinking it's some kind of plan for a prank. The man's name was Hans. He was very curious what the boys were talking about. He decided to go and check it out. The boys' names were Kai and Muller.
Muller, you want to know the dark story of this complex?
Muller, with curiosity, said,
"Sure, why not?"
Kai began to tell the story.
It is said back then, before we were even born, this complex used to be ruled by a dangerous gang. The gang used these apartments as storage to hide their weapons and money. What's really horrifying was this gang wanted to take over the city as well. But the feds raided the complex. Everything went down to a shootout. Some of the gangs were killed during the attack. The feds arrested the gang and broke into their apartments and confiscated the guns and money that was hidden. After the complex was rebuilt, the new locals reported seeing strange figures walking in the complex, even at night.
Muller wasn't believing what Kai was telling him. He believes it's all made up.
Wow, man, that's a really cool story. I think you had enough watching too many gangster movies, don't you think?
Kai wasn't pleased that his friend wasn't believing him.
But it's true, though. This actually happened.
Before Kai could finish his sentence, the boys were greeted by Hans. "Morning, boys. What are you two talking about?" The boys looked at Hans with surprise. Kai answered,
I was just telling Muller about the dark history of this complex.
Hans replied to Kai with doubt. "Really, what's the story, then?" Kai explained the story to Hans.
The dark reality of this complex, this place used to be ruled by a dangerous gang many years ago. These criminals also wanted to take over the city. Luckily, they never succeeded. The feds raided this place with force. However, it all turned into a shootout. Some of these gang members survived the shootout. Most of them died.
Hans questioned to Kai's story. "So Kai, why did this gang use the complex for?"
The gangs seized this complex as their storage. They would use the apartments to store their weapons and hid their money. That's why the gangs used this complex as their base and storage, if you will.
Hans thought this story of Kai was all made up. "Well, boy, you sure read too much comic books. Where did you hear this from? Who told you?" Kai, with disappointment, he told to Hans.
I got this information from the library by downtown. They had articles about this event.
You got this from the library. Don't always believe what you read or hear from someone. They could be telling you fake news. Muller was listening to the conversation and agreed with Hans's comment. "Well, enough of this foolish fantasy story. Now, if you excuse me, I'm going to the store. Good day." Muller looked at Kai awkwardly. "Listen, bro. I like you. We've been friends for a long time. But don't take this personally. What are you saying is impossible. No shadows can be roaming this earth. Nothing comes back from the dead. I have to go. It's getting late. See you tomorrow." Kai was disappointed from what they said of his story. "It's not impossible. I know it's real. What else powers our bodies? I know those archived documents were real. I know this place has blood on its hands. Oh well. Kai headed back to his apartment. Meanwhile, Hans walks to the store to go to collect some food for his dinner. As he's walking on the street, he feels something strange. As if he were to walk in a freezer. Son of a bitch, it's cold out here already. Should have brought a sweater. Unexpected weather. As Hans was walking, he saw someone standing in the alley, like a statue. He assumed it was just a homeless person and didn't give any thought of it. And he just continued to walk. Hans went inside the store and bought what he needed. He bought himself a loaf of bread, fish, 2 kilos of cheese, tobacco, coffee, chocolate, pepper, and drinks. He headed back to his apartment. While he was walking with his groceries, he spotted 2 figures running in the alley where he saw the homeless man. Hans followed them discreetly. Hans walked towards the alley, but to his surprise the 2 people were gone, vanished from the face of the earth. They were nowhere to be seen. Hans was confused. Where they gone off to? That's strange. I followed them, now they're gone that fast. Maybe there was a door nearby, maybe they went inside, or something. Better get going then. Hans walked back to his apartment. As he's walking, he was still thinking about those unknown people he just saw. He's never seen them around here. He thought to himself they were just tourists. As Hans passes the playground, behind Hans, a shadow figure appears out of nowhere. Hans, unaware of the presence of the figure looking behind him, it only stands there, stares at Hans. Back to Hans' apartment. He was cooking some of his fish he bought from the store. While he was cooking, he turned on the radio for a catchy tune. Hans turns and looks at the radio, thinking it's being drained out. Great, the batteries are dying, god damn it. Useless machine. Hans hears a knock at the door. Who could it be at this hour? He fixes his shirt, opens the door. Hans opened the door. It was Mrs. Duffy. She has a box with her. Good evening, Mrs. Duffy. What a pleasant surprise. What can I do for you?
Good evening, Hans. I wanted to stop by and give this early birthday present. I hope you like it.
Oh, how kind of you. I appreciate the early birthday gift. You shouldn't have. Would you like some of my coffee beans? Goodness me, they brought these wonderful aroma coffee beans from Central America. Costa Rica, if I'm correct.
No thank you, and more of a tea person. But, thanks for the offer. I have to go now. Goodbye.
Hans, with a fake smile, politely said, "Have a good evening, Mrs. Duffy." Hans closes the door. If her husband were alive to see this, he would beat the shit out of me. I wonder what's inside this box. Hans grabs the kitchen knife and proceeds to open the box. Hans opens the box and looks inside. It was a black leather trench coat and a black wool hat. The left side of the arm sleeve, it had a crest of some kind of a clan or a family seal. Hans thought it was a brand from a designer. Well, not bad looking, not great or terrible. I wonder what brand this is from. Indeed, this is a man's look. Later that night, everyone was asleep in their homes. No one was in sight. Hans was asleep in his room. Then suddenly a knock occurred outside his door. What was? He went back to sleep. This time someone or something banged the door harder. Hans heard the noise and got up quickly. Who the fuck is outside my door banging at this hour? Hans with fury, he woke up. He went outside to investigate the intruder. I bet it's Kai and Muller behind this prank. I just know it. All right, you bastards, playtime is over. When I get my hands on you. To Hans' surprise, there was nobody at his doorstep. Nobody was in sight. Only the park lamps were glowing in the dark. Strange. There's no one out here. Wait a minute. They might be hiding somewhere. You little motherfuckers are going to pay for this. Hans went outside to find out if Kai and Muller were behind this prank. He went in the playground. Nobody. The mini park, not a single person in sight. No sight of Kai and Muller. Okay, this is creepy. No one is here except me. I'm going back. The cold wind forced him back to his apartment, but his door was shut. Someone or something locked him out. Son of a bitch. Wait, I don't remember locking my door. No way, it's not possible. Hans tried to open his door, but it was no use. He decided to go through the window from his apartment. However, he tried to open it. No luck. Suddenly, Hans heard something coming from his apartment. It sounded like someone was inside his apartment. Hans looked closely to his window and saw someone moving from his kitchen. Oi, who the fuck are you? Get the fuck out of my apartment, you ass. Before Hans could finish his sentence, a strange person looked at Hans from the kitchen. The person just stood there in the dark like a statue. He took a couple steps back and grabbed his head. He ran to Mrs. Luffy's apartment for some assistance. The next scene shows Mrs. Duffy doing some paperwork, what it appears to be. So, then she hears the knock from the front door and sees it's Hans. Unexpected, she says.
Hans, what unexpected surprise. What are you doing at this time of hour? Is everything okay?
Hans replied, I'm sorry to disturb you at this hour. It was not my intention. This may sound strange, but could I spend the night in your apartment? Mrs. Duffy looked at Hans awkwardly.
Why? You have your own apartment. What's wrong with your place?
Hans, with a shaking tone, said, I know. It's just I saw someone or something got in my apartment and locked me out. Whatever this person is, they don't seem to be from here. They don't look friendly. Mrs. Duffy looked at Hans with a serious look, and at last let him in. The next scene shows Mrs. Duffy and Hans are in the kitchen conversating about the apartment being occupied by the intruder. Mrs. Duffy offers some tea to Hans.
Hans, what really happened tonight?
Well, I was sleeping. Next thing I know, I heard knocking like 2 times. I thought it was those boys, Kai and Muller. I went outside the complex to check it out. No one was outside, except nearby neighbors or strangers. No sign of those two.
What made you think it was Kai and Muller?
I assumed it was a prank they were pulling this morning, but I was wrong. They were talking about a foolish fantasy story of this complex, saying that this place has blood on its hands. That boy sure reads too much comic books. Mrs. Duffy was curious of the story.
Fantasy story, blood on its hands, huh? That's strange.
Yes, a boy's comic book story just to scare us. Foolish boy. Well, I'm leaving now. Hans walked back to his apartment. The cold, windy night came out unexpected. Once Hans got to his apartment, the door was open with the light on, assuming the intruder had fled the scene. Hans walked inside to inspect the room. Hello, anybody here? I guess they left in a hurry. Damn son of a bitch gave me a heart attack. He saw his box on the ground, but it was still close. He picked it up, put it on the table. Before he went to bed, he saw someone out his window, but he just closed the curtains and went to sleep without caring anything. The camera focuses on Mrs. Luffy. She was thinking of what Hans said to her about Kai's story. She was very curious. Still, she thought it was strange. Why would someone lock Hans out from his apartment in the middle of the night?